What if I told you that our whole modern idea of creativity is, well, kind of a myth? To really get why, we've got to wind the clock back, way back, like 500 years to the Italian Renaissance. So let's just start with a really simple question. When you hear that word creativity, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Because for a lot of us, it's a very specific and maybe, just maybe, a misleading image.
We picture this lone genius, right? An apple falls on their head, or there's a sudden lightning bolt of inspiration, and bam, they create something totally new, something that just didn't exist a moment before. We call it thinking outside the box.
But here's the thing. The Renaissance masters, the very people we hold up as the ultimate creators, they had a completely different idea. For them, genius wasn't about thinking outside the box at all. It was about masterfully rearranging what was already inside it. And for a perfect example, just look at the Villa Medici in Rome. At first glance, it looks like this single, unified masterpiece. But if you look closer, you realize it's actually a collage. You see those reliefs and sculptures? They're ancient Roman artifacts, literally just mortared right into the wall. It's an absolute masterpiece, built from spare parts. And that one idea, that's the key to understanding the entire Renaissance worldview.
To get why they thought this way, you have to try and see the world through their eyes. And Renaissance Italy, well, it wasn't a clean slate. It was a landscape of ruins. The glorious Roman Empire had become this scattered collection of broken statues, toppled columns, and half-buried walls. And this practice, using old materials to make new things, it actually had a name, spoilia. It's a Latin word, and it literally means spoils, like the spoils of war. It's the ultimate act of recycling, taking bits and pieces from old buildings and giving them a brand new life. So, okay, put yourself in the shoes of an architect back then. You're not starting with a blank page, not even close. You are surrounded by a vast, beautiful junkyard of genius, a world made of fragments. Your job wasn't to invent something from scratch, but to somehow make sense of this beautiful, chaotic mess that your ancestors left behind. And that right there, that posed a huge philosophical question. I mean, it's one thing to reuse a single column, but it's something else entirely to assemble thousands of mismatched parts into something that's coherent and beautiful. How do you build a new world from the fragments of an old one?
Now, this wasn't just some practical problem. It was a really fierce intellectual debate, and it was all framed by these two powerful competing stories they inherited from the ancient world. You can think of it as a showdown, the monster versus the maiden.
First up, the monster. This idea comes to us from the Roman poet Horace. In his work Ars Poetica, he basically warns artists about the dangers of just clumsy assembly. He asks, what if a painter just decided to stick a human head on a horse's neck? Or, give a beautiful woman the tail of a fish? You wouldn't have a masterpiece, you'd have a grotesque, ugly monster.
So right there, you have the two competing philosophies. On one side, you've got Horace's monster, this fear that if you combine parts, you just get chaos. But on the other side, you have the story of the painter Zeuxis. See, his goal was to paint the most beautiful woman in the entire world. So what did he do? He didn't use a single model. Nope, he chose the absolute best feature from 5 different women and assembled them into a single, seamless, perfect ideal. And that was the choice every creator faced. Do you risk making a monster by just jamming things together? Or do you try to be like Zeuxis, combining fragments so perfectly that the final piece feels totally seamless, as if it were always meant to be?
So painters and poets, they wrestled with this. But architects, they found their own path. I mean, they were dealing with stone and gravity. They needed a more systematic approach than just, artistic feeling. They needed rules. And you can see these two different approaches side by side right here. On the left, that's the Arch of Constantine, a real-world example of spolia. It's powerful for sure, but it's also kind of a hodgepodge of pieces from different time periods. But on the right, that's something else. It's a drawing by the architect Vignola. He wasn't drawing a real building. He was creating a theoretical ideal, the composite order, a perfect, logical system built by combining the best bits of other designs.
So while painters were talking about capturing ideal beauty, architects were getting nerdy. They were creating grammars of design, actual rule books for how different pieces, columns, capitals, cornices, could and should fit together. Their goal was to turn that chaotic junkyard of the past into a coherent, reusable system for the future. And there is one ancient story, a story that was retold endlessly during the Renaissance, that just perfectly captures this unique architectural way of thinking about creativity. It's the story of how the Corinthian column was invented.
So, the story, as told by the ancient writer Vitruvius, it starts with something kind of sad and simple. A nurse leaves a woven basket on the tomb of a young girl who has recently died. It's filled with her toys, and to protect them from the rain, she places a square tile on top of the basket.
Okay, so time passes, and a acanthus plant whose root happened to be right under the basket starts to grow. Its leaves push up against the bottom, and they're forced to curl outwards by the weight of the tile, wrapping all around the woven sides of the basket.
Then one day, this Greek architect and sculptor, Callimachus, he just happens to be walking by, and he sees this chance encounter, this accidental combination of a man-made basket, a natural plant, and a simple stone tile. And in this mashup of fragments, he doesn't just see a curiosity.
He sees a design. He sees the shape of a new kind of column capital. The basket becomes the bell shape, the curling acanthus leaves become the beautiful decoration, and the tile on top becomes the abacus. From this completely accidental composition, he works out the rules for the Corinthian order.
This one story just captures everything, doesn't it? It shows that invention doesn't have to come from some flash of genius. It can come from simply observing how existing fragments, the basket, the plant, the tile, can be combined in a new and beautiful way. Callimachus didn't invent the Corinthian order from nothing. He discovered it, already existing out in the world.
So what does this all mean for us today? It means we might need to fundamentally rethink what creativity really is. It's not about magic. It's about assembly. You could even call it recreation.
Look, the key takeaways here are simple, but they're pretty profound. The Renaissance, this period we hold up as a peak of human originality, was basically the world's first great remix culture. They didn't throw out the past. They dissected it, they understood it, and then they reassembled it to build their future. For them, creativity wasn't some mystical spark. It was the craft of masterful reassembly.
So maybe the most creative thing we can do isn't to just stare at a blank page waiting for lightning to strike. Maybe it's to look around at the rich, fragmented, incredible world we've inherited. The real question then isn't, what new thing can I create from nothing? Instead, it's, what beautiful, meaningful, and new things can I build from the pieces that are already all around me? So what fragments will you choose to reassemble?